Good evening. It's time for us to begin. Let's begin with a couple of announcements. We've got One Circles coming up this Sunday, and then September 30th, there's a ladies' eat out in Salina at Martinelli's. Details in the bulletin about that, or see Tracy if you have questions. Men's breakfast is coming up October 4th. We'll have a soup supper here at the building on October 25th. So we'll be looking for more details on that. And then Hogback mission trip, October 9th through the 13th. So lots of things coming up. Some news to report. Mike Bruns had his back surgery, is now recuperating at home. He's still dealing with pain management, and want to keep him in our prayers as he recovers. And then just a moment ago, Lee let me know that Lisa is with her mother right now. Her mother, Nita Garza Ortiz, has been on hospice, and the end is drawing near for her. So Lisa is there to be by her mother's side during this time. So we want to remember the Klein family and Nita in our prayers. We do have a memory verse. So our current memory verse is Romans 10, 9 and 10. That if you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you shall be saved. For with the heart man believes, resulting in righteousness. With the mouth he confesses, resulting in salvation.
I'd like to stay here longer than men's allotted days and watch the fleeting changes of life's uneven ways. But if my Savior calls me to that sweet home on high, I'll live with him forever in glory by and by. Oh yes, I'll live in glory by and by. I'll tell and sing that story there on high, there with my dear Redeemer, no more to die. Oh yes, I'll live in glory by and by. I want to be of service along this pilgrim way and lead the lost to Jesus as fervently I pray. As day by day I travel, I'll keep him ever nigh and live with him forever in glory by and by. Oh yes, I'll live in glory by and by. I'll tell and sing my story there on high, there with my dear Redeemer, no more to die. Oh yes, I'll live in glory by and by. The end I know is nearing, by faith I look away to yonder home supernal, the land of endless day. I'll cling to him forever and look beyond the sky and live with him forever in glory by and by. Oh yes, I'll live in glory by and by. I'll tell and sing love story there on high, there with my dear Redeemer, no more to die. Oh yes, I'll live in glory by and by.
Let's go to our Heavenly Father in prayer. Father in heaven, you're such a loving God, Father. Father, hallowed be thy name. Father, you bless us this evening that we can be together to worship you and praise you, Father. And we pray that, Father, that you'll guide us in ways that our services to worship you will be pleasant to you, Father, and be pleasing, and that, Father, that all will be as you would want. Father, we thank you so much for the many blessings that you give us. We know, Father, that you do love us And we love you, Father. But we know that you loved us first while we were yet sinners. Father, we ask that you would be with us throughout the days ahead. Guide us and direct us in ways that we will do things that will please you, Father. For Father, this is our prayer through your Son's name. Amen.
That's going to take a minute. Excuse me. I forgot to turn the computer on. Talk amongst yourselves. No. Actually, it does need to be turned back about 4 minutes, 3 or 4 minutes. But that's another discussion. Yeah. It doesn't affect the way I preach. Of course, now it's just sitting there spinning. It's never done this before. I can still do this. We just can't see our notes. So that might affect things. I don't know.
We'll manage.
We'll make it. Oh, updating the system.
Oh, better.
That's not good. Nobody told you to do that. All right. Well, we'll figure it out. Welcome back. Sorry you were under the weather last week.
Yeah.
And interesting you were under the weather the day we talked about Jephthah's harsh vow.
It was inconvenient for me too, believe me. I would rather have been here.
So no, it was good. We had a good discussion. So that's kind of where we're at. If we do a quick recap of Judges 11, Judges 11 tells the story of Jephthah and his leadership over the nation of Israel as a judge, and he was kind of a similar story to what we've heard before in some of the other cases where he was not the expected person to be the leader of the nation, but he was the person they needed, and they called him into that leadership position, and he accepted it, and then led them through a victorious military campaign, only to then follow that up by making a vow that was unfortunately the thing that we remember him for, which is a harsh vow about whatever came out of his house he would offer as a sacrifice. So we talked kind of at length about that last week. Is there anything you were listening? I know you did. Anything you wanted to add to that?
The only thing I wanted to add is that I could not find any recordings of anyone who's offered to the service of the temple or service of God who was therefore required to not marry. I also think it's possible, since they say it's his only child, the big concern with her virginity is not necessarily just that she won't marry, but that Jephthah will not have any descendants at this point. His entire line is cut off at this point.
Right.
So that may be a reason that is emphasized, that one of the judge's lines is just already done in his own lifetime.
And that being the reason that virginity is mentioned as in the context of her being offered as a sacrifice.
Yeah, that would be the reason for mourning it, is that it's representative of kind of a line ending. Which is interesting because we already talked about the idea that he is of an illegitimate union. He was the son of a prostitute, so he would have been excluded from the assembly for some time, pretty reasonably.
Okay.
So even his children would have been, but there was no more rejoining of his line to the assembly of Israel.
Gotcha. Okay.
Which is also reasonably tragic.
So, and it is, and that, like I said last week, sorry, this thing is driving me bonkers.
I think someone went through the back and just adjusted them all. I've been fighting mine too.
I feel like all of a sudden I'm left-handed, or it's supposed to be But it, like I said last week, I'm not going to, pick a fight with anybody who believes one way or the other about whether he actually offered her as an actual burnt offering and sacrificed her on an altar versus whether that's taken more of a figurative stance of she was offered in temple service. I'm trying to recall if there's any other. We have a couple of maybe one or two places where male children are offered. Samuel was sent to work as a temple servant, but I don't recall other females that were offered that way. So I don't know if there's a comparison that we can make in Scripture or not there for that. Anyway, it's a hotly debated topic. We're not into hot debates here. We're kind of into figuring out the best we can what we can, and then trusting that God. A quick thought. One of my favorite verses when we come to something kind of controversial or unknowable, if you will, on that, how we're going to come down on that. Deuteronomy 29:29. It's an easy one to remember. 29:29 says, "The secret things belong to the Lord our God, but the things revealed belong to us and to our sons forever, that we may observe all the words of this law." So if God wanted us to know all the specifics about everything, He gave us all the specifics about everything He wanted us to have, and He intentionally kept some things back as secret things that are for Him to know. And He gave us all we need to know about Jephthah, and we'll do the best we can with what we know about him. So there we go. And we'll trust that God has the rest of those details sorted out. All right, so let's move on to, I don't know if it's happier things, but different things anyway, as we work our way through the next couple of Judges. And I think, dare I predict that we get all the way through chapter 12 today?
I hope so.
It's very
it's
short.
Not peculiarly long, and I don't think either of us had a heck of a lot to say about it.
I'm not going to get too verbose, so any more than I already have. All right, so let's jump into chapter 12. Now this doesn't work. Got to do this first. There we go. Now I went too far. Okay, there we go.
Then the men of Ephraim were summoned, and they crossed to Zaphon and said to Jephthah, "Why did you cross over to fight against the sons of Ammon without calling us to go with you? We will burn your house down on you." Jephthah said to them, "I and my people were at great strife with the sons of Ammon. When I called you, you did not deliver me from their hand. When I saw that you would not deliver me, I took my life in my hands and crossed over against the sons of Ammon, and the Lord gave them into my hand. Why then have you come up to me this day to fight against me?" Then Jephthah gathered all the men of Gilead and fought Ephraim. And the men of Gilead defeated Ephraim because they said, "You are fugitives of Ephraim, O Gileadites, in the midst of Ephraim and in the midst of Manasseh." The Gileadites captured the fords of the Jordan opposite Ephraim, and it happened when any of the fugitives of Ephraim said, "Let me cross over," the men of Gilead would say to him, "Are you an Ephraimite?" If he said no, then they would say to him, "Say now Shibboleth," but he said Sibboleth, for he could not pronounce it correctly. Then they seized him and slew him at the fords of the Jordan. Thus there fell at that time 42,000 of Ephraim.
All right, so as always, I got a map. As often, I guess, not always. So Zaphon is right there, if this map is to be believed. So right in the heart of that Manasseh, which, Manasseh got an east and a west inheritance. And then we have Gad and we have Reuben, but this is the land of Gilead, right? Gilead was a region, but not a part of the land of inheritance. There's not a tribe of Gilead. And so when we talk about the land of Gilead, it's just kind of in that area. And so, we've talked a lot about in Judges the idea of a lot of these were kind of tribal or regional judges and battles and things that were going on. And so you have these people, this group of people that are identifying themselves as Gileadites. They're from that region. And it almost seems in some ways to kind of supersede the tribe, the tribe idea of what tribe they were from. And so now Ephraim comes along and said, "Hey, you just went to war, you went to battle, you didn't give us the chance to come and fight with you, and after a victorious fight, what happens? We get spoils, we get a lot of stuff, right? So you didn't give us the chance to go to battle, and you won, and now we'd kind of like some of that stuff that you went to battle and got. And so Ephraim is not happy about it. But, you know, it seems to be there's also this kind of they kind of jumped on the bandwagon here. Did they know there was going to be a battle? Did they know war was about to happen? Did they know that they were congregating and amassing on the border with Ammon for war? You know, it would seem like these things were not done in a closet or in a quiet way. You know, and I think Sam's going to maybe talk more about that in a minute. But Chuck,
Here, the question that he's asked them, that Jephthah asked them there in verse 2, you know, I and my people were at great strife with the sons of Ammon when I called you, and you did not deliver me from their hand. You know,
Yeah.
it sounds like that he did.
Yeah.
I mean, according to that, it sounds like he did ask them to come to battle.
and whether, you know, the time, we don't have great insight into the exact chronology of the events that took place, but we know that area of Gilead was being persecuted. They were being, what's the word they keep using over and over? They were being oppressed. There we go. That's the word. They were being oppressed, and Ephraim had every chance during the years that Ammon was oppressing that area of Gilead to come to their rescue. If they were looking for a fight, the fight was there all along. Whether or not Jephthah said, hey, we're about to go to war, would you like to come join us? If they wanted to go to war, that opportunity existed for a long time. And so it could be that Jephthah sent emissaries and said, hey, would you like to go to battle with us? And they said no, and now they're trying to play like they never got that message. Or it could be that we were going to war to defend ourselves, and you had the opportunity to defend us all this time, and you never did. So why are you mad now that we went and took care of it ourselves? You had the chance. And so either way, it works that, you know, they didn't do what they had the opportunity to do, and why they did or didn't do it is up for debate. But, you know, we don't, and we may not have the answer to that. But this leads to infighting between Ephraim and Jephthah and his crew. So we have children of Israel, we have Israelites now fighting one another, and so this is never a good thing when you have, you know, brother fighting against brother. And so Justin, you had thought?
Judges 10:9 says the Ammonites crossed the Jordan to fight also against Judah and against Bethlehem, Benjamin, and the house of Ephraim, so that Israel was severely distressed. And then the rest of chapter 10 lumps them all together as the children of Israel. And so, I mean, they were having Ammonite raids against them. And when Jephthah finally rises up, I mean, it's something that it seems like as a nation we would have banded together.
Yeah.
And so maybe there is a little bit of a case where, hey, we would have come to help, but you were selfishly wanting to spoil us for yourself, so you didn't call us in, or, you know, I don't know. There are other ways maybe that they were thinking about this, but I mean, the other thing that is interesting is that the tribe that Jephthah and some of the Gileadites come from is Manasseh.
Right.
Which is, I mean, the Ephraim and Manasseh come from Joseph, and so they're literally the tribes of the brothers of, you know, I mean, they're one generation even closer, I guess, we would say, than some of the other Israelites out there. Yeah. And so it seems like they would be people that would watch each other's backs. I mean, Manasseh was quite huge. There's some on the east and some on the west. But this brother fighting brother is to me even more poignant when you know that they're from like the same overarching tribe of Joseph, but then they decided to break up between Manasseh and Ephraim. And so even when they talk about this infighting, they talk about how they are a scourge among, I don't remember what verse it is, but even a scourge among those of Manasseh. So even among your own tribe, you're a scourge. And so they do not take kindly to that and fight back against even some of their own tribesmen, let alone other Israelites.
Yeah, you're exactly right. So that, you know, to summarize that, you know, Ephraim and Manasseh came, they were descendants of Joseph who went into Egyptian captivity. Well, he was he was the first one to go into captivity, but then he became the leader of Egypt. And so his sons he was given the double portion of inheritance through his sons. And that does make them a closer, that they should be the two closest tribes to one another. They should have each other's back. And so that makes the infighting that much more, that much sadder. So, brother fighting against brother is never a good thing.
So did someone have something to say, or am I hearing things? I'm hearing stuff. Okay. So the question of the recruiting, some commentators suggest that the most natural route in Judges 11:29 says that when the Spirit of the Lord came upon Jephthah, he passed through Gilead and Manasseh, then through Mizpah of Gilead, and from Mizpah of Gilead he went to the sons of Ammon. So a lot of people think that the most natural route for him to have done that, to go to Manasseh, if he crossed over and was asking, if we go back to the map, I actually did look at a map so I could explain this properly, but if he crossed over from that kind of Gad, Manasseh region there to ask of Manasseh's help on the other side of the Jordan, it's pretty reasonable that he would have gone through Ephraim at some point. So even if he didn't specifically ask them for help, he was going through asking for people to come help fight. So it's reasonable that he would have asked them. It's possible that it's not listed because they didn't say yes. It's also possible he did not directly ask them, and what he's saying is, you weren't going to rescue us. You saw that we were in trouble and you weren't worried about it, so I had to take my life into my own hands. Which then kind of brings up the next question. What do you mean took your life into your own hands? People came to you and asked if you would lead their war party, and you said, okay. You thought, okay, how about this? If I win, then I'll get to be your chief. And they said, okay, that sounds good. And they went before God, and they kind of made sure that was all good. I kind of taking his life into his hands is kind of a dramatic way of saying that I was appointed war chief of my entire tribal area. So kind of interesting phrasing there. Now, he obviously did go and fight after this. He didn't go and fight as one man, but they did go through, was it 20 towns, 20 cities? Am I remembering the number correctly? Yeah, verse 33, from Aroer to the entrance of Minnith, 20 cities as far as Abel, Keramit. So he obviously did a lot of fighting. So his life was certainly in jeopardy at some point. I don't think Jephthah hid behind a bunch of people either, if that's what they got him for. But him saying he took his life into his own hands is acting almost as though Ephraim should have done it for him at some point. I don't know. The Ephraimites, we kind of mentioned, they taunt. Oh, sorry, Chuck.
Finish.
Oh, well, I was going to go to my next point. You want to go now?
Well, I was just going to say, talk about taking his life in his own hands. If you look at the previous judges, it talks about, one of them slaying 600 with an ox goad, and things like that, and so you've got to think that he was right there in the thick of battle. That he wasn't back in the back saying, hey, go get him,
Yeah.
That he was right in there, so that's to the point of taking his life in his hands.
Yeah, he certainly risked a lot in it. That was his main concern when they even asked him. He's like, hey, am I going to go fight this for you, and then you guys are going to kick me right back out? Because he was uninterested in that. Because there was risk in it. He didn't want to risk it all if they were going to leave him kind of on the sidelines of society. In response to this not going how Ephraim wanted, Jephthah didn't really do quite what Gideon did, because Ephraim didn't do anything this time. When Gideon had his problem with the men of Ephraim, he was kind of like, hey, you guys got the 2 generals, though. Good job. That's better than everything I got. This time, since Ephraim didn't do anything, there was nothing to say to them about it, really. They were mad about this. And like Justin brought up, they say, you're fugitives of Ephraim, O Gileadites, in the midst of Ephraim and in the midst of Manasseh. So it seems like what they're saying is, you guys are from across the river. You're not even hardly real Israelites. Like, who do you think you are, going and fighting the battle for Israel on your own, not asking us for help, even though they didn't do anything in 18 years' time? Not like they didn't have time. This wasn't a 1-month adventure that Jephthah went on in response to an attack. They had 18 years to respond. It didn't happen. But they kind of taunt them, act like they're only kind of pseudo-Israelites, and in response to this, Jephthah they go and they take the fords of the Jordan, and they don't allow the men of Ephraim back over. They can't hardly get back to their homeland at all. And they pay for it pretty dearly, because anyone trying to get over, they would test them. I don't know if this was some commentators' point that it might have been a result of tribalism, that the different groups of Israelites, though they spoke the same language, their linguistics were becoming different, that the Ephraimites could not say shibboleth. They didn't hear a distinction between the two words, so they would always say it the same way. If from childhood you don't hear a distinction of sounds, your brain does not make that distinction. That's just how our brains are formed. It's why a lot of English speakers or Spanish speakers, Asian languages are difficult for us, because they use a different distinction of sounds than we do. It's possible that's what happened. It'd be really rare, I would think, for a speech impediment to be that widespread that they simply couldn't speak appropriately, that they would have had a forward lisp all the time, that they couldn't make a sh sound. But it worked well enough to identify people that they killed 42,000 of them. That's a huge number.
You know, whenever the Israelites originally settled in that land before the Jordan, they put up a monument as a reminder, hey, we're part of we're all one people, and so, and then here the Ephraimites are saying, well, you're not part of us, you live over here and you're just not part of it. But that's what they put that monument up for originally, was to remind them, hey, we're your brothers, even though we're over here, we're your brothers, we're all one people.
And if they had all been serving the Lord and had been remembering all the monuments they had made, then they would have remembered that. That would have been one of the important monuments to them. If they were still serving God appropriately, that would be something they would remember, and they would think back on that. But since they're busy serving other gods and getting themselves into trouble, they're not even worried about their own tribal associations anymore.
Yeah, if they'd have been serving the Lord, the Ammonites wouldn't have pressed him in the first place.
Yeah.
So,
Well.
there you go. Johnny.
It just makes me wonder why these people show up after they had just seen what God had blessed Jephthah with by taking a smaller army, defeating a bigger army, and they themselves couldn't defeat that army, and yet they thought, oh, we'll just go beat them up now.
Yeah.
That makes no sense. I mean, they're fighting against an army that they had just seen God bless.
Yeah. That's a great point. And so if we didn't already know that Jephthah was God's chosen leader, then now we have God's stamp of approval on Jephthah again, that he was the one that God picked to lead the people, because God saw him through this battle. And so, and the 42,000, I've always kind of read that as that's the final count. I'm sure there was, I don't think there were 40. I don't read it as 42,000 people slain in the river crossings. I read it as 42,000 total. So there's been a battle. There's been a war between Ephraim and the Gileadites, Manasseh, and there's been a great slaughter. And then in their retreat, even more of them die. 42,000, that's a big number. That's a lot of people. Tim.
I agree there's something there, because you'd think after 4 or 5 people going up and having a little trouble with their speech and they whack them,
Yeah.
I don't think 42,000 would just keep on getting in that same line.
Yeah.
I would hope not.
This is, I try to picture what it's like. Bands that's, little bands of people that are retreating or trying to make their way back to their home after the battle, after they've been routed, and they're trying to sneak back across the river or whatever, and they're getting caught in small little groups, and not really knowing what's going on in the larger sense, because of the disarray after a lost battle. Justin.
Maybe you kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier, but the jumping on the bandwagon thing just got me thinking. I mean, these these guys are doing basically the same thing. Jephthah seems to be a judge that has to deal with people pigeonholing themselves with the truth. It's like, oh yeah, the Ammonites were like, well, this was our land and you should give it back now. No, it's not, and we're going to wipe you out. And they're like, well, you never let us come and help you. It's like, well, you had plenty of time to do that. And so it seems like everyone that's coming up against Jephthah are using very twisted logic to paint themselves into the, oh, we're so honorable and you're the dishonorable one. And it's like, well, it's so interesting that the way they twist the truth to suit their own narratives, and yet the truth and God's people prevail all the time. I think that's an overarching theme that, the enemies of the people of God today can twist the truth and make it sound really sweet and make it sound nice and make it sound like, oh, we're the ones that deserve all of these great things, when the truth is, God has blessed his people, and I don't know, it's just interesting the way the truth is twisted so commonly in these two chapters.
I think that's a great application for what we see going on here, and how Jephthah stands up for what is right all along, and early on he kind of pays for it by being in exile. He's even driven away from his people, and he was willing to give up and not, there was a time when he was willing to forgo the battle and not fight that battle and go be separated from people who were not willing to acknowledge his right to be a part of the community, versus later they ask him back, but he comes back on the basis of truth. He's not going to come back on the basis of making up a scenario where he's not who he actually is. And so I think we have to be willing to accept that as well. Interesting application there. Okay. All right. Here we go.
Jephthah judged Israel 6 years. Then Jephthah the Gileadite died and was buried in one of the cities of Gilead. Now Ibzan of Bethlehem judged Israel after him. He had 30 sons and 30 daughters, whom he gave in marriage outside the family. And he brought in 30 daughters from outside for his sons. And he judged Israel 7 years. Then Ibzan died and was buried in Bethlehem.
All right. I think we'll see some of these things. There might be comments on one slide here, but they might apply. We're going to see a couple of judges in rapid succession here, that some of these comments kind of fit one or two or three of the kind of the upcoming judges. So, with Ibzan, we see a judge without conflict, which is kind of a weird scenario, because usually it's the conflict that leads to a judge being appointed or being given given authority over a time and a place. But here it's just like, Ibzan pops onto the scene and he judges Israel, but where's the battle? Where's the oppression? Where's the sin? Where's the repentance? That it's just kind of, he was the leader of Israel, and then he wasn't, then he died. So, one writer or one resource said, this could be a signal that we were looking at a person who was kind of a tribal leader or a chieftain of an area that was, during that time, had regional stability. And we've talked about the overlap idea, that some of these judges may overlap with one another. And what if Ibzan is kind of in conjunction over Benjamin, while Jephthah and Manasseh and Ephraim are at war and at war with one another? Benjamin doesn't really involve themselves in that. And so it could be that we see some overlap here, where during this time it was Ibzan's turn to be the leader of the tribe, but they didn't have any conflict. They were just kind of at peace. That's a possibility. We don't know a whole lot about Ibzan. He only gets a couple of verses.
The phrase "outside the family," a lot of people take that to mean outside of Israel. Typically, tribes stayed within tribes, but so the term "outside the family" could mean that he was simply bringing in people from outside of his tribe for his sons and giving his daughters to those outside. It doesn't make a lot of sense to do that, because all of them would have already been at peace with one another. The typical reason to do that was to have peace. So some commentators suggest that he is kind of trying to make peace with other nations by giving his daughters out and bringing women in for his sons from other nations. Deuteronomy 7, the first 4 verses, completely forbid that, so it would have been against the law to do. So it's not certain that that's what he's doing. It's possible he was just having his children intermarry among tribes. But either way, it was kind of a strange practice. It was an abnormal thing to do, and that's why it's specifically listed.
Yeah. Right. All right, next judge.
Now Elon the Zebulunite judged Israel after him, and he judged Israel 10 years. Then Elon the Zebulunite died and was buried at Aijalon in the land of Zebulun.
That's it. Elon gets 2 verses. The name Elon, interestingly, could come from the idea of being a mighty oak. The word Elon itself can just refer to an oak tree, and then the idea of oak being kind of the king of the forest or the mighty tree, it lends that idea to it being used as a personal name, that there's some source of power or might to that person. So Elon was a mighty guy. That's all I got.
Another thing to note, what we're seeing here is, we don't know what they're doing, but one thing we do know is that their judgeships are pretty short. And all of them, I mean, it's when they die, typically. I don't think we have any other recorded time when a judge is no longer judging while they're still alive. There are times where the judges, like Samuel, was trying to prepare his sons to judge, things like that, but we don't ever see a judge retire and be done judging. So it seems like most of these guys started judging, within a decade of when they died, and it doesn't say they were dying of old age either. We don't know exactly why, but times in Israel might not have been great. This could be an indicator of that their judgeships kept being short because either they were at war and they were dying, or they were old, or there were food shortages, or any number of things could be going on.
Doctors back then.
No.
So they had a disease that's, they shortened their life a whole bunch where,
Yeah.
Disease is definitely another option. We just really don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of, all we can do is speculate. It could have to do with that regional idea of them being just a regional leader for a short time or something like that, or it could be something more nefarious. We just don't know. Verses 13 to 15.
Now Abdon, the son of Hillel, the Parathonite, judged Israel after him. He had 40 sons and 30 grandsons who rode on 70 donkeys. He judged Israel 8 years. Then Abdon, the son of Hillel, the Parathonite, died and was buried at Pirathon in the land of Ephraim in the hill country of the Amalekites.
All right, so what's the deal with so many children? We had Gideon with 70 sons. We had Ibzan with 30 sons and 30 daughters, and we had now Abdon with 40 sons and 30 grandsons, and they had 70 donkeys. Well, donkeys were those were a status symbol. So so one source said this: lots of children in Judges is a narrative shorthand for elite status, wealth, and political networks in a decentralized era. They had a decentralized government. They didn't have a king that centralized their government in one area, and so they had to have ways of overcoming that decentralized leadership. They didn't have one person that spoke for the whole nation, so they had to have lots of smaller kind of tribal treaties and workings with surrounding nations and stuff like that, or at least they believed they did. So they had a means for doing that through having lots of children and intermarrying their children with leaders from other tribes and things like that. And so the author of Judges spotlights it to show the advantages of having these large families, which would be stability and making alliances. And also there's dangers in it, because what have we seen happen that was bad? Gideon's, that didn't work out so well for him to have 70 sons. And so it was a bad deal there. And so we see things like dynastic strife and moral decline. And then if you look at Deuteronomy 17, that's specifically given as a command to one day when you have a king, he's not supposed to take a lot of wives and have a lot of children. That's not going to be good for the nation if the king does that. Now, we don't have a king, but we have lots of smaller scale leaders. And if it's not good for the one centralized king to do that, it's probably not a good idea for the smaller decentralized leaders to do that as well, and try to force their influence on surrounding areas through their large families. So there were dangers to doing this, as well as maybe politically some strategies for doing it. But I think the dangers we see overwhelmingly are probably probably outweigh the positives of doing it. So, you know, I think that those are kind of highlighted, maybe foreshadowing some things that come later, where we see some kings, even the really good kings, having lots of trouble based on the fact that they had children that were rivals with one another and things like that. So, could be some foreshadowing there.
The only thing that kind of caught me is the idea that Abdon, the son of Hillel the Parathonite, died and was buried at Pirathon in the land of Ephraim, in the hill country of the Amalekites. So is it Ephraim or is it the Amalekites? Right? So, going back to Judges 5:14, this is during the song of Deborah and Barak, when they're talking about who all came to fight. Verse 14 says, "From Ephraim, those whose root is in Amalek came down." So that's the only other real reference we have to Ephraim and Amalek seeming to be on good terms with one another or something like that. So it's possible that there were some Amalekites who were being allowed to live there, kind of on the edge of Ephraim or something like that. And that's why it would be called in the country of Amalek. That, or it was just some other kind of indicator, like a geographic indicator, where it was still Ephraimite territory, but Amalekites, maybe that's where they last lived, or maybe they were trying to lay claim to it the same way that Ammon had tried to lay claim to something. He was in Ephraim. It's not like they took him actually outside of Israel to bury him. That would have been pretty offensive. That would have been a pretty dramatic thing to do. But this is some kind of strange landmark, but it just was interesting to me.
That is, yeah, and I didn't pick up on that as I read through it. I wasn't, or maybe I'd have tried to find a map. I'm looking to find one right now. It'd be hard for me to point at it with a laser pointer for you guys if I find it on here now. But
I don't have any maps in here.
yeah, that's not going to help. All right. That one might.
First chapter of Judges, it talks about places not conquered, and it talks about Ephraim. It talks about him not being able to not driving out the Canaanites. I don't know if that Amalekites be part of the
Amalekites were the descendants of Lot. Isn't that what we said, if I'm remembering right? Descendants of, no, Ammonites were descendants of Lot. So there's three groups that I get. Amalek is not a descendant of Lot. Ammon is a descendant of Lot. And there were the Amorites. So the Amorites were Canaanite people. And if the Amalekites were in that region of Ephraim, then they would have been a Canaanite people as well. So the Canaanite peoples were kind of like we talk about Israelites, but the Israelites had 12 tribes that they could have identified as Manasseh or Ephraim or Gad or Dan or whatever, but they're all Israelites. So the Canaanites had tribes of people too. They had the Amorites and the Amalekites and other groups of people that would have identified as Canaanites as kind of their race or ethnicity, but they had smaller tribal groups that made up that larger group. So the Amalekites would have been, I guess, one of those Canaanite peoples.
I guess that we ought to put in here that it was the country of the Amalekites.
Yeah.
Because
So it was from a region that they had inhabited before the children of Israel moved in, and they had not fully eradicated them as they were supposed to. All right. Hey, we're getting, we're in chapter 13.
Our most upstanding judge.
And there's only 15 judges, and we're on to Judge 14 right now. So we're getting into chapter 13, and then we're going to kind of cover that, and then we get into some interesting stories at the last few chapters of Judges once we kind of get through the actual stories of the judges.
Technically, two more judges.
If we
Does the song end with Eli and Samuel?
Samson, Eli, Samuel.
Yeah, so there's two more after this.
Samson.
Eli, Samuel, right?
Oh, Eli, Samuel.
We don't.
What did I say?
You said one more after this.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
obviously, we're not going to cover all that.
Well, two more in
Judges.
yeah. So Eli and Samuel are actually more covered in
Yeah.
1 Samuel anyway, but there are 2 more judges after Samson. That's right. So I misspoke. But Samson's going to get a lot of
time.
A lot of time here. Does he get more chapters than anyone else? Probably. He and
they
Gideon
share?
really get the most.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, Samson has 4, doesn't he?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, yeah.
All right. Well, here we go. So we'll be talking about Samson for a while because he's got a lot of chapters. So here we go.
Now the sons of Israel again did evil in the sight of the Lord, so that the Lord gave them into the hands of the Philistines 40 years. There was a certain man of Zorah, of the family of the Danites, whose name was Manoah, and his wife was barren and had borne no children. Then the angel of the Lord appeared to the woman and said to her, Behold now, you are barren and have borne no children, but you shall conceive and give birth to a son. Now therefore be careful not to drink wine or strong drink, nor eat any unclean things. For behold, you shall conceive and give birth to a son, and no razor shall come upon his head, for the boy shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb, and he shall begin to deliver Israel from the hands of the Philistines. Then the woman came and told her husband, saying, A man of God came to me, and his appearance was like the appearance of an angel of God, very awesome. And I did not ask him where he came from, nor did he tell me his name. But he said to me, Behold, you shall conceive and give birth to a son, and now you shall not drink wine or strong drink, nor eat any unclean thing, for the boy shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb to the day of his death.
All right. So the obligatory map we've got, and this is kind of the southern area. This is the land of Judah, which is further south than we're used to seeing our judges do their stuff. We've got Jerusalem right here. And then the tribe of Benjamin. Ephraim is up here. So we were just talking about Ephraim a minute ago. And so we're talking about land south of that. And Zorah, right there. Okay, can't see from this angle. Zorah is right there. This is where the story starts. Notice how close it is to the Philistine land. It's kind of in that area where the tribe of Dan and the tribe of Judah converge with the land of the Philistines. So there's a lot going on right there. You can understand why that, if we're being oppressed by Philistines, that God's going to raise a judge from an area that is close by there, where he has a lot of interaction with them and things to do. We're going to see a lot of interaction with Samson and the Philistines over the next few chapters here. Probably too much interaction, if you ask me. But it's interesting. We've got this story. If I told you we had the story about a barren woman and an angel and a message of hope, where are you going to turn to first in your Bibles? Because how often do we see this theme pop up? We see it a couple times, right? We see it with, Abraham and Sarah. We see it with Isaac and Rebekah. We see it with Rachel. I don't know if we see the angel with Rachel now that I think about it, but we see some similarities there. We see it with Hannah. Maybe some components of it we definitely have Hannah receiving word from the Lord through Eli the prophet or the judge, if not an angel. So we kind of see some similarities to lots of different stories, and it's interesting that at a time of deliverance, or at a time when deliverance is needed, that there's somebody that God has kind of been preparing for that role, and in some cases maybe even preparing them years ahead of time, because think about if they need deliverance now and they just find out they're about to have a baby, when is that deliverance going to take place? Well, that's down the road, right? Yeah. But sometimes God is thinking ahead of time and I'm going to send this child now because later my people are going to need deliverance. And so God is making these plans, and he's sending this message of hope through somebody who has experienced the same hopelessness as the people, as they've suffered oppression, but even a more unique level of hopelessness as they dealt with that barrenness, as they dealt with not being able to have the child. And so that message of hope rings maybe a little more clearly to them, or it means a little bit more to them because of their own personal experience, as well as the national experience that they've been through. And so so it's just interesting the way that we see these themes pop up and repeat themselves through the scriptures. Chuck?
I don't really answer this or not, but why, I'm sure there's probably some commentaries or whatever, but why did God say that no razor was to come on his head?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, I can understand the strong drinking lot, but is there any significance, or do you know anything
Yes.
about that?
Probably more so for Samson than because he specifically identifies Samson as a Nazirite. And if I'd been more prepared, I would have had the Nazirite. Oh, there we go, number 6. Thank you.
Yep.
So one of us was prepared. So between the two of us, we make one teacher. So there we go. So Numbers chapter 6, and
The first,
yeah.
5-6 verses will really tell most of it. The Nazarite vow, it explains it here. They shall abstain from wine, strong drink. They shall not drink vinegar, from wine or strong drink, nor grape juice, fresh or dried grapes, the skin of the grape, the seed. They can't have any grape. And they're not allowed to have a razor touch their head. And then they cannot go near a dead person. Dead bodies are a no-go for them. So those are the 3 main things. The hair was supposed to be cut. I don't know if it was necessarily shaven off, but to conclude the Nazirite vow, the hair was supposed to be cut, and then it would be offered as part of the offering, as part of that ritual of ending the Nazirite vow. Yeah, it said Nazirite shall shave his head, dedicated head of hair at the doorway of the tent of meeting, verse 18. So one reason for it is, the growing out of the hair and then being able to cut it off and offer it was to show how long it had been. It would dedicate a certain amount of time. So for Samson to be one from birth would indicate that his hair was never cut, and that would be pretty extreme to see a person who literally never had their hair cut. You would have to have some serious braiding and stuff going on, right? I mean,
A big man bun.
Yeah.
man, that'd be huge.
No. Not okay. That's not.
I hope that
that's not
answered
the way
your
I'm picturing
question.
Samson. All right. So yeah, the Nazirite vow, and any man could take the Nazirite vow, and he could,
Or woman.
and he could, or woman.
Yeah.
So he could.
Verse 2.
Oh, man or a woman takes the Nazirite vow. So, and they would typically specify a length of time. So I'm going to take this vow, and I'm going to set myself apart for service to the Lord in a special way. And so they would designate that, whether it be a month or a year, or however long that be. So what's unique about Samson is that he is not the one that makes that vow. He is called into that life by God from birth. And so God is the one who dedicates Samson as a Nazirite. Typically, somebody would dedicate themselves as a Nazirite. I make this vow for this period of time, and I'm going to dedicate myself till that time is up. But for Samson, God says, I dedicate you for your life, that you are a Nazirite, So, so that's the unique thing about Nazirite. I don't know that it would be common or realistic or a practice where a parent would, on their own, dedicate their child as a Nazirite, and say, you know, I'm going to do this on behalf of my child, and just make that designation for them from birth, without God having directly told them to do that. So it would be a unique thing for Samson to be called into this life, which maybe, I don't know. We'll probably talk more about this as we talk more about Samson's life. But when you consider the pressures that puts on a person, or when you consider the position that puts them in, to know that this was decided for them from birth, that they had no other choice than to do this, maybe some of the things that Samson does later in life that seem kind of irrational or erratic or out of character for somebody that would be a Nazirite. Remember, he didn't make that choice. He didn't decide that for himself. Not excusing what he did or what he's about to do, what we're going to learn about, but put yourself in his position, the position of somebody who makes that vow for themselves and keeping that vow versus somebody who is told you're going to keep this vow and you didn't have any say in it. And so it's an interesting, I think it's an interesting perspective to take as we read through the story. Well, I think sometimes we're kind of hard on Samson, and maybe rightfully so, but also sometimes maybe Samson needs a little grace,
A little sympathy.
little bit of understanding for what he goes through. I don't know where we're at.
I'll throw my
Okay.
first one out there. 40 years of oppression. Like we said, we don't know exactly when it was that Samson was born. Perhaps the 40 years is an indicator of when the oppression started ending, when Samson actually got some work done. Or it seems unlikely that it would be the indicator and then Samson's born and then there's another indiscriminate amount of time. They kind of like to know how long it had been. So throughout these 40 years of oppression, some people are still responding to the Lord. Even if we're about 20 or so years in, I don't know exactly when Samson would have started. But his parents are ready to respond. She is barren, has no children. It's apparently been certainly long enough that was known. The angel tells her that, and she's ready. She goes and tells her husband, hey, there's this guy. He was awesome in appearance. You know, he looked like an angel from God. And he said this, and they were ready to believe it. Manoah wanted to see it. If I don't think we're going to continue today, but he wants to hear the message himself. He's very interested in that. But there are still some ready to respond even after all the oppression and all the disobedience. Chuck?
That makes you wonder, you know, other places that talk about a little like Hannah, you know, about praying and, you know, and everything. Some of the others, you know, like Isaac praying for Rebecca, you know, and everything. You don't have that indication here. I mean, I think you probably infer that.
Yeah.
That prayer was because the angel came to them, you know, you think that probably there was prayer all along for this.
Yeah, that would have been something that was definitely grieving them, because the Israelites were super big on maintaining their genealogies and having children to pass their things on to. The fact that she's barren and has no children, it's kind of a repetition of the same idea. This was definitely plaguing them. They did not want to be in the situation they were in, but they were. So this was a great message of hope for them. Like Jason said, it's kind of it's representative of the hope that Israel needs at this point. This is the longest oppression they face, 40 years, and they need significant deliverance. A mother with no children is to bear Nazarite from birth. We don't know if this ever happens. Samuel, it says no razor should touch his head. Same thing for John the Baptist. They could be saying that as just a kind of indicator that, hey, they're a Nazarite. That's the main visual indicator. It's how everyone else would have known. We don't see any other vows described in Scripture that would say that you don't touch your hair. So it's possible that those two were also Nazarites from birth, but it's also possible that that was some other restriction on them. But what's happening here is Israel is going over the worst oppression they've ever had, and by human terms, we kind of think, well, that means we need the best deliverer we've ever had, right? So it can't just be some guy who was threshing grain in the well. It can't just be some dude who was on the fringe of society. This guy needs to be chosen from God, you know, before day one, before they're even born. You know, it says Nazarite from the womb. Before this guy's even born, we need him to be special from God. But he will begin to deliver. Does Samson actually deliver them from the Philistines at the end of the story? I mean,
They're going to be around a while.
they're going to be around. He doesn't really do it. There's some almost human logic here where this idea that, well, our best deliverer should be the guy I would pick for the job. Oh, the guy who's been a Nazarite from birth, for sure, who's given a measure of strength that no man has ever possessed before or since, it seems. That really seems like the guy who's going to overthrow everybody. But it doesn't happen. It's because the physical characteristics have never been what has delivered the people of Israel, right? It's always been God delivering the people of Israel. Yeah, so if Samson's not going to do what God wants, and we have some pretty good evidence that he doesn't, is the deliverance really going to happen? I mean, he's going to begin it. He strikes some blows to the Philistines for sure, but he had to get all the way there.
75 years later, the Philistines are going to kill King Saul. So, you know, they're going to be around a while. And you know, David obviously deals with Philistines through his reign, and it's something that we're going to see a lot of. All right. Well, we'll pick up there, Judges 13, verse 8 next week. And until then. Because I looked at the dates in my Bible.